here we are. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for the invitation.
As I just mentioned, we're this time in Amsterdam, so I didn't have to fly across the globe.
Yeah.
So that's a little easier.
I do a lot less flying now, which I'm quite grateful for, to be honest.
Yeah. I think in the coming weeks, I'm flying a bit too crazy, or at least traveling too crazy.
Well, I'm finding a healthier balance in the flight. So I think when I fly, it's more intentional, I guess. But I have an 8-week-old baby at home, so the flights are off for the coming half year.
I think that's one of the best reasons, right? For not flying.
And sometimes it's a nice reason to maybe do fly out. It's a good reason to go to the office, I can tell you that.
Yeah, to balance your mental sanity once in a while.
Yeah, very hard to work with something that distracting at home.
I can imagine. So I always start with just explaining why I felt inspired to invite you as a guest.
Okay.
So we met through LinkedIn, but then we also met each other live in the Miro office.
Yeah.
And you taught me something that you do something around executive briefing centers. I had never heard about that concept.
Many people.
Yeah, I think it's very, very niche. But for me, what you were sharing about, how do you really design sessions where you invite C-level to understand a topic, in your case, around future of work.
Yeah.
And I think you had so many energizing ideas, and we had a click, and I felt, okay, I need to invite you for this podcast and just talk about the topic, in this case, future of work.
I think we do need to break down what executive briefing centers are somewhere around this podcast, because it's just too niche, as you shared before. So we'll get to that. Okay,
because we start with your history, right? So you have a perfect bridge to then also explain what it is. So can you just take us on your personal journey?
Yeah. How did I get there?
How do you end up here, and why do you love what you do?
Okay, I'll try to keep it short. I think the first turning point for me was when I was 17. And online gaming was really new. And I had the opportunity to be on the stage and to present my first professional presentation. So I was paid, not a lot, but paid. About online gaming. And that was basically me playing World of Warcraft with a very large crowd. Right?
Okay.
And for me, that was the point where this passion and this love for being on that stage, telling a story in such a creative way, that's where that started.
Okay.
At the same time, I met a professional speaker.
Yeah.
Brilliant speaker, brilliant storyteller. I had a lot to learn from him, but he was horrible with technology.
You were a good duo.
Exactly. So I helped him out with everything, digital, all the slides and everything. And we went super creative. It is also around the period that Prezi came out, the new slideware. And now the world saw there was more than PowerPoint. So really cool time to be in that industry. So for 3 years, I worked for him. And after that, I decided I want to build slides and presentations for more people. So I started my own company. Yeah. Did that for 3 years. So presentation design agency, and had a lot of focus on that Prezi and building something different. Yeah. And I started to notice that I had some sort of a disconnect with clients. They had titles I didn't understand. I didn't know how they use slides or how they were presenting internally. So my thinking was, okay, I'm not there yet. I did this straight out of university. And I'm a mechanical engineer by education. So it's not that I'm landed in that field, right? Yeah. But I just stumbled upon this, which I think is the coolest way to start a career, right?
Yeah. Following the universe, right?
Yeah, and I remember one presentation during university, and they presented that less than 25% of students actually land in the field what they studied for. And I thought it was very liberating. Like, doesn't matter. I'll just keep going and I'll become whatever.
You'll figure it out.
As we have here.
Yeah.
I didn't have that walk in the talk of corporate. So my thinking was, I sell it. I joined corporate, large corporate, for 2 years. So I joined NetApp, a large data storage company.
Okay.
Present internally, get to know how that works, right? Their jargon and whatnot. And then I'll pick it back up because I wanted to be that entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And then I came across executive briefing centers. And this is the cool thing, what it is. It is, so I was always focused on slides, on that screen, on presenting, on presentations, building that presentation. And what an executive briefing center is, it is a big footprint in headquarters, and serious enterprise B2B players, they all have a program similar to this.
Like the Googles of this world, right?
Yeah, totally. I've been to multiple of their centers. They're gorgeous.
Yeah.
And they dedicate this huge footprint, which is dedicated to customers, right? So you invite customers to your office, and that part of the building is designed for a customer journey to be very. There's a strong focus on experience design. So it's so much more than just slides. And that was quite intriguing. And it's all high touch, meaning that you go quite far. And for example, last week, I had customers from Japan flying over all the way to Amsterdam for Miro.
Yeah.
And we had 6 weeks to prepare, and we go deep. We make it highly personal, and we tailor the journey, and we tailor the content. We train the speakers. We do cultural coaching. We help with the flights. We help with the hotel. So you can go so deep and so far for this single customer.
It's an immersive experience almost,
very,
right? Yeah.
Very. And that I learned that concept, and I've never heard about it.
Yeah.
While I was working there, I was so intrigued that is a presentation house. Right? You
Yeah,
can use
yeah,
the
yeah.
whole building to present, right, and tell the story, and you take 2 days to do it. The customer doesn't fly from all that far to just
1 hour.
No, they stay long. I thought it was the coolest thing, so I stayed there. I joined that team, and I joined an association where everyone who's in this niche is connected, and we learn from each other. And in my time at Miro, I visited more than 60 other executive briefing centers just to learn and figure out what is your journey? What are you doing? Like, what is your experience build? How do you bring your brand to life in your building? Right? How do you do it? That is really cool to be so close connected. So I did that for 5 years at NetApp, and then I came across Miro. Like most people, Miro was discovered around the
COVID?
pandemic.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely, because we all had to figure out, okay, what is collaboration when we stay at home, right? And I joined in that excitement. They didn't have a program as such, so I wrote the job description, said, "Let's do this," and they're like, "Let's go for it." And I think this is such a Miro thing to do because they have this culture of experimentation, and they just say, "Okay, let's try it. We'll give you a year. If it's good, we'll scale, right?" And now I'm still here, almost 3 years later. And we're scaling and we're growing, and it's really cool to build that from the ground up for Miro. Yeah. So now I have a team where we have that showroom. So
The Miro showroom.
The Miro showroom. I call it a showroom because Miro is quite a young company.
Yeah.
And if you say executive briefing center, that doesn't resonate. It doesn't. It's a bit boring, right?
Yeah.
And executive is a bit limiting. Briefing feels very militaristic. Like, I'm going to brief you. And we want that to be a dialogue. So we rebranded it to Discovery Center, the Miro Discovery Center. And what I like about that is discovery. First of all, it's co-discovery. So we discover about the customer, they can discover about us. But discovery is also a journey. You go on a discovery. And I like to start the day that we're going to say, hey, open mindset. We're going to discover. Let's figure out what that is. And I'm going to ask the question in 2 days when we end, what did you discover? And that is such I think that's a beautiful way to just go through that. And then you have a different mindset while you're in that space, and doesn't feel like you're being briefed, right? You're there to figure out, to discover something.
And I think for me, that was one of the key things that inspired me as well. Because I think you mentioned that the facilitators there were also discovery leaders. And for me, that triggered my brain. Okay, because my topic is CX transformation that fosters human centricity. And I also feel that the world doesn't understand all the different elements of CX. So for me, it clicked, okay, so my new tagline, whatever mission in life, I should create sessions around discovering CX transformation.
And this is a different way of preparing for a presentation as well, because you want to leave your session, not just be sent, but you need to discover something.
Exactly.
Means that you need to ask.
You
design
need to create
differently. Space for it, right? So when we ask them to prepare, we give you an hour, but you can only have 30 minutes of content. Right? And the rest needs to be some sort of discussion. When you have a discussion, to me, it means that what you're talking about is relevant. And we are trying to figure out what is the most relevant thing. And it's, so that's how we prepare. So the name is just a name, but it has strength. Right?
Exactly. It has meaning. Okay, so the topic that we are going to dive into today is all around, I think, the future of work. And I think it's a nice balance because you are talking to executives about the topic around hybrid working. What's the function of an office? How do we collaborate virtually? But in parallel, Miro has been experiencing that journey yourself, right? How do we figure this out? So I think the combination is really nice.
Customers find it very funny that Miro, such a tool to enable virtual and digital, that has this huge office presence, right? And I think that's a cool thing because the balance is where there is strength, right?
Yeah. And why do you think that? So two questions before we dive into the different topics. Why does this future of work, figuring out why does it matter? So why is it a relevant topic? But also why is it such a challenging topic for most companies?
It's very new. If you look at how we always worked, sort of 40-hour work week, 8 hours a day. Do you know where 8 hours a day comes from?
I think you mentioned to me, but please elaborate for the listeners.
It is like 8 hours of work, 8 hours of friends, family, religion, 8 hours of sleep. So really nicely balanced.
Yeah.
And the 40-hour work week, that one of the biggest adopters of it was Henry Ford, where he changed it from 6 days to 5 days.
Yeah.
This was 1926, so almost 100 years ago.
Yeah.
Right? So we worked in the same way for almost 100 years.
Yeah.
Maybe he did it very selfishly because now people had an extra day to drive his cars. I don't know. Could be. But that is old, but it was designed for the, not the knowledge worker.
Yeah.
Right?
Factory worker.
Factory line.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah.
And it made sense then.
Yeah.
But
Mr. Frederick Taylor also around that time, right?
Why are we still doing it?
Yeah.
Why are we still doing that?
Yeah.
Right? Because we all know that we cannot force creativity in that box of 9 to 5, right? Because that is. Well, I'll give you one example from an article from John Cleese, the British comedian from Monty Python. Highly creative, really cool product. And he said something, and this is, I think, almost 18 years ago when he said this. A reporter first asked him, where do you get all these ideas from? And his first, he jokingly said, well, not from my laptop, right? I think that's already funny. And then he continues to explain that he says, it is actually at home and it is late. The family sleeps, right? Because I don't want that interruption. It is after 10. And he calls that his tortoise enclosure. And he says, when I'm in that is the space, that is the time and the space where it's just me. And that's where the story unfolds. That's where I connect the dots. So that's where it is born, right? And that is one way. But he then explains but that I need to feed it. I need to feed that. And how do I do that? By going out, by meeting people, by seeing things, by having discussions. And all of that feeds that moment of that tortoise enclosure, right? And in his book, he has a book on how to create the environment for creativity. Yeah. And he also mentions that the interruption is the biggest killer of creativity.
Yeah.
And so that's why if you look at work, how he did it, in how he works and creates that creative product, that is a hybrid way of working because it's a different location. He was at home.
Yeah.
And it's a different time. It is after 10.
Yeah.
Which is way beyond working hours. Yeah. But see how big of a creative output that is.
Yeah.
So creativity being one of the biggest killer of interruption being one of the biggest killers of creativity.
Yeah.
And then you have that office. And the office is also perceived to be one of the biggest interrupters. Yeah. Right? And because that is so, a lot of people decide to stay at home because they want to create, they want to build. Yeah. Right? So they're now trying to find a balance. I'm a creative worker. I need that creative output. If I go to the office, will I have that creative output? No, I'll decide to stay at home. Yeah. But again, they do need input from somewhere.
Yeah.
Because I remember during the pandemic when I was always at home and my commute from bed to the office was 16 steps. A bit sad. I never got outside. And being in a creative role, the creative output is not there. Because your environment doesn't change. You don't get any energy from other people. You're always in the same space. It's very difficult to be creative in such a way. Yeah. So the cool thing is we learned 2 years, we got to learn a completely radical new way.
Yeah.
And now we're all trying to figure out what is best of both worlds. But we've never had this before. It is a wicked problem.
Yeah,
right? We never had this, right? But a lot of leaders I talk to, they need to solve it fast. That's their impression. We need to solve it quickly, right? We have an empty office.
Exactly.
Because now everyone post-pandemic is experimenting with new ways.
Yeah.
It is so new that we don't have a best practice yet.
Yeah.
So you see a lot of articles of companies that go back 5 days. Companies that no full freedom, no healthy balance, and some do it on an organizational level, some on a team level, or some have all this flexibility. So there is this weird, wild mix of what everyone's doing.
Yeah.
And it goes back and forward. You have companies that and they do this for a year and then no, we need to do it differently, and there is no best practice yet. And this is why it's top of mind.
Yeah.
Because what does it do is they struggle with retention. They have lower employee experience is lower.
Yeah.
And that's why it's such a hot topic. They're all trying to figure out, okay, what works and learn from each other.
Yeah.
So that is the conversation I often have with a lot of leaders.
Yeah. Nice. And how do you go about, let's say, answering those questions, right? So they come to you saying, hey, okay, we see the challenge.
Mm-hmm.
They come then, of course, to Miro because it's also a solution to work virtually. But what are sort of the topics that you walk them through to start thinking about this?
Yeah, the cool thing is I don't talk about Miro as a product because we need to elevate this discussion.
Yeah.
So executives are not coming over to talk about the tool.
Yeah, not how it works.
And they're coming over, and I had this literally a company saying, we're 100-year-old. We want to learn from a 10-year-old.
Yeah.
Right? And the cool thing I think about Miro is we have such a culture of experimentation.
Yeah.
That we're young, but we experiment so much. Right? One of our values is iteration, where we are trying to figure out, okay, how can we create the smallest version, learn from it, and then grow based on that, and keep ourselves very flexible.
Yeah.
So they want to figure out, okay, how do we bring that into our office? And Miro in Amsterdam, we call that our headquarters a living lab.
Oh yeah.
And that is two concepts, like living and lab. Living to us means that flexibility. It needs to be able to change, right? And that's actually two things. Everything is movable.
Yeah.
So nothing is on the wall, right? The screens are on the cards, right? Even the plants are on wheels. We can just move and decorate the space to what we need, right? So if we have feedback from our employees, we can recreate the space easily.
Yeah.
Right? We're not fixed in that thinking. The other part of that is most of our furniture is on subscription. And that, the room that I have, the briefing center, the discovery center, I always say that's on a version 5 because of feedback.
Yeah.
And that is, I think, the coolest thing. And so we can change a lot. We just work with a third-party company that we say, we have this amount of square meter, we have this amount of people we need to cater for, bring us a version 1, and then we'll open it up to everyone to join that experiment. Right? All everyone, where are the lab coats? Join the experiment and ask for feedback. The cool thing about that, they provide the feedback because they know that we can change. So it makes sense to give feedback, and they see the change because you know those airport totems, were they happy or not? So every time we have a new space, we put that totem in front of it to also as a messaging to everyone. Hey, there is something new there, so they can check it out and give the sentiment. But it's really that symbol of change. So you see it popping up here and there. They see the change, and now if we send out a survey, people are actually answering, and I think that is a really cool thing. So that's what they want to figure out. How do you learn so fast? And one of the topics where we dive a bit deeper on later is hybrid. Because that happens to us. And you want to ensure that the office is ready for it, but we're trying to figure out, okay, what is that experience then? What is a good experience regardless of where you are? It's super difficult.
And I think also one of the topics you mentioned that because we were prepping this, maybe we should use like paradoxes, right? So I want to be connected to others, so might be a reason to go to the office, while indeed the office is also interrupting
Totally.
my work.
Yeah, I got this from Microsoft when I visited them, and they called it the working paradox. Everyone wants that flexibility. I'm gonna stay at home because want to wait for the package, or I want to pick up the kids, or I want to walk the dog. Anything. Those are personal drivers. This is also the reason why hybrid happens to us. And this is a really cool exercise I do with customers. So they're in the room, and I ask them, okay, pick up your phone and look at yesterday. How many meetings? Right? So they go over it. Okay, 8 meetings. More than pre-pandemic? Definitely more than pre-pandemic. Okay, next question. What do you know? What is virtual? Do you know what is hybrid? And just to get a good sense of what does the day look like?
Yeah.
And many do not really know, and more importantly, they did not agree on a way of working. Right?
Okay.
And I said, but what was it for you? And they say, well, this was, I joined virtually. Why? Right? Well, because I wanted to go home and there's usually a personal reason to it.
Yeah.
So it's personal drivers, but hybrid happens to us, and 45% of my current engagements are hybrid, meaning someone wants to dial in to be part of the meeting.
Yeah.
And that is usually because of this personal driver. But we would never lead with hybrid.
Yeah.
If it was up to us, we would do it in person, or we do it virtual. And it is not that I'm telling someone else, you know what? Why don't you two stay at home?
Yeah.
And we'll make it hybrid. It's the new thing. It's going to be a better experience. No one does that. But it happens because people decide for themselves, I have my own agenda. I want to go home. I'll dial in. And that's the expectation.
Yeah.
They expect that there is a link for them to dial in.
Yeah.
And this is difficult when you didn't communicate or agree upon what was okay.
Yeah.
So the paradox is that everyone wants that flexibility themselves, the work-life balance. And on the other side, they also want to be seen and as involved, right? And that is so difficult to combine.
Yeah.
Right? And I like that, to see that as a paradox. And I think this states the complexity of it as well. And I think because of that complexity, we don't have a best practice yet, right? And one more. Okay, I have 2 really cool examples about the complexity.
Yes.
We had a junior developer in one of our design teams, and he was new to work, junior. So he went to the office to learn. So to ask a quick question, to sit next to someone in his team who was a bit more senior, and to maybe just eavesdrop, but especially for that quick question, so that doesn't have to be a meeting.
Yeah.
Right? That was for him.
Yeah.
The senior saw that as distraction.
Yeah.
So they started working from home, right? Now the junior goes to an empty office, right? And now, okay, how do you do that then?
Yeah.
Right? And so you need to make that work. So even if your way of working might be from home, you need to create that synergy in a team. You need to make it work for a team, right? Or else this just spirals and we'll end up with even more empty offices.
But how do you make it work? Does it mean that you talk about it together, or how do you make it work?
Well, I think you need to make it work on a team level, and you need to talk about collaboration hours, for example, where it's okay to be interrupted.
Okay.
Right? You need to discuss what is okay within that team.
Yeah.
And I like to have it on a team level. And I think this is also Miro, because in our mission, we say empower teams. So we do a lot on team level.
Yeah.
That you discuss that, okay, what is that then? And really have a discussion about what does it mean to you? Why do you work from home? What is the value in it, right? And this is also where you get to a healthy balance of what is working from home versus working from the office. Because if you do it on a corporate level and you do that, let's say you survey it.
Yeah.
And someone says, no, I need 5 days in the office. And the other says, no, it's one day in the office is fine for me.
Yeah.
And then you have that. And then the company says, all right, we listened.
Let's average it.
Let's do 3 days a week, right? And you have this average employee trap where you end up in, right? So that's why you leave it more on a smaller level for them to work it out, but also to make it more personal to what it means to them, right? And that doesn't per se mean that you need to fix it on on a certain day, for example. But maybe that is what you need to do.
So then the policy, the advice to, let's say, the C-level is, hey, don't make an average policy. The policy should be, dear team, discuss together what works for you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I think if you go for that one size fits all, it's going to be very difficult for a lot of people. And for some people, that was maybe just going to be too difficult. Right? And that is a good reason for them to start as quiet quitters and then look for something else in the meantime, right? Which you don't want. And some people will feel left out, but because maybe the Wednesday was their day off, their stay-at-home day.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah, I think that you can also customize it. I'm also immediately thinking about the link to, let's say the feeling of control, right, by managers and leaders, where it used to be, again, 100 years ago, it was input steering, control-based, fear-based in essence. And I think that system is still present, right? We have KPIs, we have task steering. But in this more hybrid world, I think you have to figure out a way, how can leadership be okay with not having this control way of managing, more output-based, more, empowered. Do you also see that that's a topic? And any tips there based on experience with Miro?
It is a shift in that conversation, right? I noticed that it's more the managers that struggle with it, right? And struggle that they can not control their team or not satisfied, or really trying to figure out, okay, what is that common ground that I need to have? But not per se from a leadership, but they do. They mention often when I have with them in a room that they have this empty office, right? It doesn't feel right because they want these people to build relationships. And I mentioned before this podcast, like it is just so difficult to build a virtual relationship, right? And I think, can you? I don't know. Maybe gamers have figured it out. Maybe
true.
They can do that. I think you can maintain a relationship virtually, but building the relationship, I think that's very, very difficult. And when I ask someone, why do you work from home? One of the most common answers is that they feel more productive. And that makes sense to me because at home you have a lot of focus time. And so if you do more focus time, you're building, you're creating, you're writing. So the end product of your day could be a product, could be something, right? A piece of text or I don't know, whatever you
something tangible.
Yes. So you feel more productive, right? But if you stand in line for coffee and you have a conversation with someone about a project blocker, and that person might be able to point you in the right direction, or that maybe is the right person, you don't know. There's productivity in that. But it's the hidden productivity. It is unmeasurable productivity. And that's what makes it difficult to steer on that, right? But there's tremendous value in that serendipity. Right? And
what do you say to the person that comes to you saying, hey, we have an empty office? How should they go about meeting the challenge?
Why is it empty? Right? Why is it? You need to talk to people to ask, okay, what is the blocker? Maybe the office is too far out. Maybe there's nothing there. Maybe the office, and this is for many, the office doesn't have all types of work. Because the workday is very complex. And I had one company that, I don't think I should name them, but doesn't matter. Virtual first. One of those companies that went virtual first, right? They closed a lot of offices. But they also opened other offices, and they were in more prominent locations, easier to get to, more central. So there was more buzz there, smaller. And they said, okay, we're going to be more intentional. And this office, because we've listened, we asked people in our organization, why do you want to come? And they gave us two things. You said you're coming to the office to collaborate, and you're all coming to the office to socialize, right? Great. So those two things, we're going to build the office around those two things, right? It's going to be the studio. That's going to be it. So now people come and do that. And then you find out that, yes, they come to collaborate, but the workday has a lot of different modes of work combined. So you collaborate, yes, you might do that for 2 hours, but the workday is a lot longer. And you need a space for heads down work and a one-on-one. And if you go through your agenda, you see so many different modes of work combined into a single day. You need to ensure that the office has space to bring that all to life. You can do that entire working day from the office if you want them to come in. Right? And also then you can think about, okay, collaboration space. What is a collaboration space? So I think it starts with really listening and really on maybe in listening to teams, right? And not just a survey, but really just diving a bit deeper into more personal approaches.
The whys behind things.
Definitely. But really get a deeper understanding of that.
Yeah.
I think it starts there. And one example which I find really cool with Miro, because we have that living lab approach. So living, did I explain lab? Lab is really the learning aspect of it. Okay. Right? We invite everyone to the experiment, to join that experiment. Yeah. Because we have that living lab approach, our starting point was 2.5 years ago when we opened this office in the center of Amsterdam, was 40% desks, what we brought in. Okay. So of everything that we brought in, 40% of that footprint were just desks, monitor, where you can just work. Yeah. Where do you think that is now?
Ooh, I would say...
Everyone has it wrong, so let's go.
I would think at least it's higher.
Okay, yeah, that's good. Higher. How much higher?
I would say maybe 68%.
80%. Nearing 80%, right? Which is such a wild difference from our starting point. Yeah. Luckily, we had the living lab to accommodate for it. Yeah. And because we noticed that is the lion's share of a day. Yeah. Right? It's where you are behind your laptop and just doing something. Yes, you do socializing. Yes, you do. Yes, you collaborate a lot. But that way of working, and it's often a neighborhood kind of style where you work alone together. Yeah. Right?
Next to each other.
Yeah, alone together. Yeah, neighborhoods. That is really popular. So we took out a lot of collaboration spaces, social. This brought in.
Yeah.
Right. Now we're going to a new office, and now we have it better under control. We know what people want. Right.
Yeah.
But luckily, we had that flexible approach.
Yeah, you were able to learn.
We had an office where a lot of people would not come because there was no space for them to work. Yeah. Right. Or else I need to sit in a living room kind of style with my laptop, and then I'll stay at home. Right. So
it's two things, right? For, let's say, C-level leaders listening, it's one, really understand why people are not coming or are coming to the office, but also try at least to design it in such a way that maybe you experiment for half a year with a setup, but that you don't invest in something that has to stay like that for 10 years. Yeah. Right? And you create flexibility to learn as you go.
Because no one knows what their new way of working is. Yeah. We say new way of working, but it's not there yet.
Yeah.
Right? And I
on the road too.
I share this example often in when I present and share this with customers. And I show them a photo of Dick Fosbury from the Fosbury flop. And I said, first, who is this? And they don't know. Okay, Dick Fosbury. And he said, do you know, because he jumps backwards, right? Yeah, jumping high, and he had the record. Do you know how they jump before it? And they often don't know.
Yeah.
He said, well, not like this. He invented that, right? And first there were a lot of laughs next to the track, but he was experimenting and trying. It is not that he was next to the track and thinking there, you know what? I'm going to jump differently today, right? There was a lot going on, a lot of testing and trying. And at one point he jumped and it was higher. And now everyone jumps like that. Yeah. We don't look back. Now we have something new. Yeah. We're in that phase where we need to figure out a new way of jumping. Right? Yeah. And we all need to experiment and share and be very transparent about it until we have that new jump. It is better and we don't look back. Right? And that is the new way forward. But there is no new way yet, but we're trying to find it. So this discovery in that is such a cool discussion. Because I met with 140 customers in 2.5 years at NetApp and leaders. And we have this discussion ongoing, and we take snippets of it and we learn and we improve on it, and then we share it again. And so I know, I feel that we're getting somewhere.
Yeah.
Right? But it's we're not there yet.
Yeah. And in the let's say virtual hybrid working context, you've had a lot of experience by now. Any tips how to facilitate that optimally?
Yeah. I think we have the most learnings for hybrid. because hybrid happens to us, often accidental hybrid, where you find out that someone wants to dial in, but it's a new reality. It's also a new expectation. People expect that they can dial in.
Yeah. So just again, to make explicit, hybrid is in person and virtually, right?
So someone or multiple want to be part of the same meeting, but they're not in the room.
Yes.
But still, they're part of it.
Yeah.
Right? And often they don't feel part of it. And they dial in and the room is not set up for it. And they feel like they're not flying first class.
Yeah.
Right? And I lead a big in-person program, but 45% of my engagements have a hybrid component of it. So I need to do something with it because I also notice that it's often the most senior person that wants to dial in. And I want to build a relationship there.
Yeah.
So for me, that is very important. So we started with a question, what is the digital twin of first class? And what is the digital version of that? Because when you come to Miro, you fly in, you're there in person, you meet the people, you get our food.
Yeah.
Which is phenomenal.
You get a personalized something, right? That resonated maybe from the intake that you mentioned, like the Ferrari tickets.
Yeah, we do a lot of personal. Yeah, we even print cool stuff on coffee and whatnot. Yeah, so we go quite deep. But we also do a tour through the office. So a lot of focus on, those are all in-person experiences.
Yeah.
What's the equivalent of those for someone who dials in?
Yeah.
And not the copy.
Yeah.
Because the copy is horrible. Because when we go on a tour and we tried this, we had this GoPro or FaceTime and
you were on a stick
people
with
can tag along. And it was horrible because now they just see their colleagues touching the fabric and taking a photo and having a one-to-one conversation, staying behind. And they're just sitting at home looking at them like, can't do that. So that was not a good experience. And because of that, we said, okay, we need the equivalent of it. Okay, so what is it that we're trying to share here? Can we create another medium for it? So one of the learning. So I call it a rule of two for hybrid. So you need a lot of twos. And it's a people, process, and technology change. And the first change is on people, where we say, hey, we're doing these high-touch engagements. They're high investments, right? So we need to make it count, knowing that the most senior person is likely to dial in. We want to build a relationship there as well. So we say, what we're going to do 2 facilitators. Someone who owns the in-person group, someone who owns the virtual group. And imagine now coming in. You open a meeting, you acknowledge it's going to be hybrid, and you present yourself as the facilitator who will bring your voice into the room. Because it's very rare that someone at home will silence a room. It's one of the most difficult things for someone at home to bring in their voice.
Yeah.
So we need that voice. So the virtual facilitator will help you bring your voice into the room. So the communication between both facilitators needs to be spot on, which is really good. The other thing is, because we don't want to compromise. We still want to do that tour. We're not going to shy away from it just because people at home cannot do it.
Yeah.
So we're going to build 2 agendas. So 2 facilitators, 2 agendas. One which has components of it which are just in person, and one which have components on it which are focused on the virtual strength, right? It's and that's different. And I always say that we always say, don't forget the man in the van, because when the superhero goes out, there's always someone in the van doing the navigation and whatnot. They're a team, right? They're a team.
Yeah.
And they are both part of the same operation, and they're both critical, and they both have their own strength, their own role.
Yeah.
And that's how we approach the virtual participants as well. They have their own strength. So, and one really cool thing is when you are part of a meeting and you look at the meeting room and we give swag to people, goodies and whatnot. And then you're at home, you think like, I want that too. So we created a virtual swag store, and they can select something themselves, and often it is only 1 or 2 people dialing in.
Yeah.
And we just ship it.
Yeah.
And it is worth the investment because it's usually the most senior person that dials in. So it's worth that. So it's usually 1, but often like 2 people.
Yeah.
So 2 people, 2 facilitators, and both with their own role, and 2 agendas. And if you now come in and you see you have your own facilitator and you have your own agenda, I feel so welcome. They expected me. Right, this is fine. And that sentiment alone, that's like, oh wow, they cared. Me being, they expected me, right? And that is what you usually don't see.
Yeah.
And then the third is 2 screens, because often rooms are set up in such a way that you have 1 screen, but I don't want to combine content and people, because then you compromise. And when you're presenting your slides to the room, you look at the people in the room, meaning that the other people are behind you, and you cannot present in both ways, right? They're super difficult, and you cannot see them.
Yeah.
So you will forget about them.
Yeah.
We have something which we call the facilitator gym.
Yeah.
And because it's a muscle, you need to train it. And we do it once a month. And we do training sessions. And usually within 2 minutes, they forget that there are people there.
Yeah.
Because you don't see them.
Yeah.
So we say we're going to split content and people. And we're going to put people on the table. That screen is mobile and it takes a portion of the table. So I put it near the speaker so they feel closer to that speaker, right? Not in the far end of the table, because everyone looks at the people and then they lose them as well. And they will complete the table. And this is where, because you talk to people. You don't talk to a camera. You don't talk to just a voice, right? You don't know where to look. So I want to make it the setup as natural as possible. That's why I put them on the table. So that's how we do hybrid. If we say the rule of 2, do we have 2 people? Can we build 2 agendas? Can we bring in 2 screens? We're super fine with doing that meeting in hybrid. Right? And of course, in the midst of it, for us is Miro. The people at home are on that Miro board. And that's also a way for them to bring in their voice. So.
And if you scale, because that's how you are designing the experience also in the discovery center. If I'm, I don't know, you mentioned Microsoft, or if I'm, I don't know, any company, right? How can I learn from that to scale it? So should I start talking about what are some principles when we work virtually together? Or can you, let's say, translate that to my context of me having a company with 20,000 employees?
Where you want to learn?
Yeah, so how do I do this well as a company? Should I create like a set of principles? How do we work virtually together? So how do I make this virtual work for me as a large company?
I think you need to understand where it comes from. Why are we doing it? Right? The same for hybrid. Why are we doing that? Because maybe we can avoid it, which is great. See that as step 1. Right? But I think what we need to do more is like a retrospective after important meetings or workshops, where we just ask from everyone, how was it for you? Because often there is it is not great for people who are at home. They don't have a great experience. Right? They didn't bring their voice into the room. They were there to listen, but they were some sort of ignored. And I think if we do that retrospective and actually take that as the final 10 minutes on the end of the meeting, where it's like what went well, what didn't, and then actually have that and read it. I think if we do that more, then at least we have that feedback to action on.
Right? I think that's also immediately linked. I think one of your quotes was also, or maybe I read it somewhere, I'm not sure, is that...
I hope it's my quote. Was it good?
Of course it was good, otherwise I would have mentioned it. No, I think that you mentioned that there's, from all the 140 companies you visited, I think 0 has said, we have an amazing meeting culture.
Because I started noticing this. So I kept asking the same question. How is the meeting culture? And as soon as you ask that, it's like...
exactly.
Meetings, right? And that says a lot, right? And it is, I don't know, it's very, very difficult because meetings are, there's a negative energy to meeting. It's not like, meeting, right? Oh, I'm going to a meeting, right? So it is difficult because I had one company that said, we did meeting training because we just needed to align. We needed to figure out what was allowed, what was okay, what can we agree on, what are the rules, how do we open, and the simple things where they said, guys, this is going to be hybrid. You know what that means? That someone is here as well. Can we all be aware of that and help us be aware of that? And if that person raises his hand in Zoom and you see a small hand, can we all point it out? Something like that. Make everyone responsible for that.
Make it explicit.
And also the facilitator, lead with them, right? If you do maybe an introduction, start with them. It's those type of agreements, but also acknowledging it and being made aware, because at some point we're all gonna be the person on the screen.
Yeah.
Right. So we all know that experience, right? And often it is very suboptimal.
Yeah.
I like that. That was such a cool idea to just say, hey, we're gonna just take some time to discuss how we meet and what that means, right? And zooming out and taking a step back, because before this it was either virtual or in person, mostly in person. So that's what we're really good at. But now these other flavors are coming in. You see people. The pandemic was super predictable. We were at home always. It was just exhausting because it was meeting.
And virtual only, right? Not hybrid, for example.
Yeah. But now you think like, where's this? Where's that room? I need to walk there. But someone have that meeting directly now, right? I can't even walk in that space. Or someone dials in while driving. Oh, but you needed to watch the slides I'm presenting here. Like,
so funny,
sorry. I'm. This is where I need to pick up the kids from school. It's that.
Yeah.
Right? And this is because we decide our own agenda.
Yeah.
And it's difficult.
Yeah.
Right? So I like that this company said we're going to take a step back and just discuss.
Yeah.
What do we find okay? Because everyone wants to figure out their meeting culture.
Yeah. And any other in your learning journey, any other inspiring tips that you received?
Experiment.
Okay.
And make sure that you can experiment, right? So try not to lock yourself in with it. And I think you need to celebrate the experimentation and the failures of it. At Miro, we have a session which is Miro Fails, and we celebrate the failure, right? And that is a session where everyone can join in, you share what didn't work, and we celebrate it. And that is the coolest thing.
Yeah.
And this is also where we learn and throw those learnings in the organization.
Yeah.
And we tried something new 2 weeks ago with this Japanese customer, where we brought in a screen with Google Meet, and it had this live translation, and it translated to Japanese, and it worked, and it was well received, and it was so cool. And that is something I threw into the organization. It's like, this worked, this was cool, but we have teams which are also in Japan and here that need to be working on the same project. So I think we need to all be aware that we're not there. We're on this way. We're on this journey.
Yeah.
We just need to be very open in experimenting. And the essence of an experiment is not knowing the outcome.
Yeah.
We don't know where it goes. And so let's stop with building business cases. Let's just figure out cheap versions to fail.
Yeah.
And that just go with that small version and to start with.
And maybe then also apparently accept that we don't have the answer yet, right?
Don't see it as a project where it has an end date. We need to deliver this to leadership on December. We need to present something, right? And that's going to be it, right?
For the next 10 years.
Yeah. So it is not, it's a program which is ongoing. This is going to change. And we have a lot of learning to do in this space.
Yeah. And I'm also hearing you say to optimize for learning, maybe you should also design for how. So maybe next to designing the way of working, maybe it's just as important to design how do we learn, right? So how do we ask feedback? How do we capture feedback?
Yeah.
How do we share, okay, we tried this. This worked really well. This didn't work. And we try again, right? So design for learning, right?
Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah.
But you need to find ways, and I think multiple ways, to provide feedback or to test things. We have painted 4 rooms in our office yellow, and that are the 4 rooms which we're trying new hybrid setups and layouts. And when we know someone booked one of those rooms, you could get a question from our workplace team.
Yeah.
How was it?
Okay.
And for example, what we test here as well is interactive screens, like the touch screens.
Yeah.
And this was not in development during the pandemic because no one had those at home.
Yeah.
The largest ones. But it needed to be picked up after, right? And then we ask, okay, what kind of screens do we need? Touch screens. Why? What are you using it for, right? And in a Miro office, we started with 100% touchscreens, and then we figured out that 1 in 200 meetings actually use the touchscreen. So that is a very expensive room to move forward with. So it's those learnings where you learn fast, and because it was a lot on subscription, we can change and bring back a cheaper version of it.
Yeah.
So it's but you need to be able to set up for experimentation. And we had customers in. Remember that quote from earlier? How can a 100-year-old learn from a 10-year-old?
Yeah.
We have companies which are 100-year-old coming in, and we share how we do it.
Yeah.
And we had one lady that just sit down, and was like, just like this, right? And it was such a cool moment. And she sighed so loud. I stopped the room, and I asked, "Okay, what is that?" And she said, I don't see us getting there. Right? We're not that, right? So I think it's tricky for a lot of companies to figure out how can they create space for experimentation, right?
Yeah, because I think experimentation is not just a topic here, right? It's also with customer experience, with anything, right? I think most companies are just not designed for experimentation, right? And maybe that's also connected to the 100 years ago. We had tasks, we had steering, everybody knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
Now we have a super quickly changing world, but also I think we have a workforce that wants to be empowered, right? That wants to try out things.
Yeah.
Where the old 100 years ago system is saying like, not sure if that's still the best system to use.
Yeah, difficult, huh?
Yeah.
It will remain difficult for a while.
Yeah.
But we all feel that something needs to change.
Yeah.
Or we're all trying to figure out, what is it? What is it through us?
Yeah.
Because there is no one size fits all.
Yeah.
Right? And then you need to figure out what works for you, what work with the people. That's why I think they need to listen and talk to the individual.
Yeah.
Talk to the team.
Yeah.
And it's a conversation. It is not a survey.
Yeah. Experiment, listen, learn. Any other tips or topics where you feel, hey, when people are listening around future of work, designing it,
well,
we should
I think
definitely
you need to share that you are listening.
Okay.
So it's great that's step one, but how do you feed that back into the organization? Because you want to, as soon as you show that you are listening, like workplace, the room changed. Oh, they listened? I'm going to give more feedback, right? They listened. As soon as you feedback that you are listening, then you create that culture that, okay, they care, right?
Yeah.
Then cool stuff will come from it.
Yeah.
Right? And maybe that is just on the person where I said, I had this hallway conversation with, they shared this, right?
Yeah.
And that is so much more powerful than a statistic.
Yeah.
Right? That is a real something.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that resonates so much more with actual people, with other people within the organization. I have that too.
Yeah.
And now also they see the opportunity. They're like, they actually listen. So I'm going to create that moment.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to provide feedback.
Yeah.
Because they listen and they want to
take
do
it
something.
Seriously.
They want to do something with it. Right? It's not that they know what to do with it, but I think that as a step one, showing that you listen, so that you create that muscle. And then showing that you want to do something with it, I think that is where it needs to start.
Yeah. Just a question, we're about to going to wrap up, but a question popped in my head. So these companies come to you with this question about need future work, my office is empty, how do we do hybrid working? So they have a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Then they are on a journey with you for, I don't know, let's say 24 hours. They learn about also Miro, they talk together. What is sort of the top 3 insights or feedback that you get from them when they sort of go back?
Office redesign.
Okay.
So we created an abundance of weird flavors in our office and we test them out.
Yeah.
And we invite them to the experiment. And we go into the room, we meet there, and then we ask, how was it? And that is the experiment there. That's cool. We had customers that got back to us later with photos saying, look, we did what you did, right? Because they're trying to figure out, okay, how can we create an office which people actually want to go to and make sense? And often that also means you need to figure out what can you do in an office what they cannot do at home.
Yeah.
right? Okay, what is that?
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And that is also a learning where they're more intentionally trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
More involvement from others, but also obviously trying to put Miro in the midst of it. I always like the word async meeting, which feels like an oxymoron. Like meeting is in person, but how can it be async?
Yeah.
And we do this a lot. And this is also one of the learnings.
Async meaning as in, right, I'm doing something at 10 and somebody else doing something at 3 p.m., right? Yeah.
But I think we need to extend our meetings.
Yeah.
Meeting is that moment, but there is something before and after, right? That is one thing.
Yeah.
If I want to meet with our CFO, he wants me to send him a talk track, which is a board recording with information. He will look at it in his own time. He looked at it. Now we can meet. And I had a meeting which was 6 minutes only.
Yeah.
With 3 minutes about the weather and then 3 minutes on decision. And that's it. Super efficient.
Yeah.
But this is how I get on his agenda and get something done. So we focus more on why do you meet? Well, it's often to debate or to discuss or to decide.
Yeah.
It's those the 3 Ds.
Yeah.
And for meeting cultures, you need to figure that out as well. So we have a long discussion there. Okay, what does that mean to you, right? And it works for Miro because it comes from top.
Yeah.
They ask for that recording. Then yes, we can meet.
Yeah.
But if it's not there, I'm not going to meet.
Yeah.
So it comes from the top down.
Yeah.
And that now you see other people picking up the same way because, that's efficient.
Yeah.
That was a 6-minute meeting and I got stuff done.
Yeah.
Right. So that's
that's tip number 2. One final tip number 3. Or insight that you hear them say when they've been talking to you about this topic.
I don't know.
No.
I'm trying to come up with something, but we shared a lot.
So then we can also flip to the question, anything that we forgot to share right now, or you feel like we covered the most important topics?
I talked a lot.
That's the idea of a podcast, Sid.
Yeah. No, I don't know. What do you think?
I think we covered most of the topics that we were prepping.
Yeah, it's a cool topic.
Yeah.
I like this topic because everyone is...
That's super clear, right? Your energy is very contagious. Emotional contagion.
Yes.
You also wanted to bridge emotional contagion.
Dan Cable shared that on your previous content. And that was so cool that he came up with that because that happens. I think that only really happens in person. You can do that virtually. Maybe if you're the person that could do that, right? Energy and everything. You have that. You blow it through the screen. But I think there is something, and he called this magic, right?
Yeah.
When you have that moment, impactful, but don't really know. And I think some things which you cannot count, but it counts. Right? There's something happening when you're in person.
Yeah.
There's something more communicated, because when we're sitting here, I see so much more than just verbal.
Yeah.
And that
you feel things as well, right?
Yes. Yeah. Hard to put your finger on, but that is words. Every meeting we have after this, even if it's virtual, it's going to be better.
Yeah.
Because we had this.
Yeah.
So one engagement, one like this, will drastically improve everything that comes after, right? Because we have a better sense of how do you say it. I think the only thing left that we have virtually is a paralinguistic tone of voice, and which is the non-verbal aspect, but it's too limited. And the cool thing is, in the pandemic we did radio DJ training. Because I kind of felt like a radio DJ. Cameras were off, microphone was off. I wanted to make a joke. I had no idea people laughed. So that's probably maybe how a radio DJ feels, right? So,
but it's so funny that you then start doing a radio DJ training, right? I just love that.
And we had a brainstorm where we think about virtual. Okay, we went through. What does it improve, enhance? What does it make obsolete? What is a return, right? And some other, I forgot the third one. We just went through an exercise. And someone put a sticky on there saying radio. And we think that is how we need to look at it.
Yeah.
And so we came up with a training, and we actually enhanced everything audio.
Yeah.
And we had these laughing tapes and whatnot. We had a subscription to voice mods, and we can bring in multiple things to really build up that experience.
Yeah.
And we created a light board like a glass between the screen and us we can draw on add that experience layer. It was so cool. The stuff we did to make virtual experience a lot better.
Nice.
We don't really do that anymore because we tend to focus a lot more in person. But there is so much learning when you look into another industry. That was really cool. So I think we need to build in-person relationships to enhance everything virtual later on, right? That will improve all the virtual engagements after. But I see a lot of companies that really focus on, okay, we have less offices, maybe we'll shrink that down, smaller footprint because it's quite costly, right? All those offices, so they have a healthier balance there. You know what? And they even hired all across because that's what the pandemic did. Like, we can now hire from everywhere, right? And those people are not even near an office. Okay, now post-pandemic, I'm all the way over here, right? So how do you build a relationship with that person? That's going to be difficult. So I see a lot of companies that are more focusing on those moments of getting all together. There's more travel budget for team managers. You can get your teams together twice a year, right? For a few days, right? And that meeting is going to make every meeting after so much better, I think. Yeah. So I think that we just leave it at that. Right?
Let's do that. So thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for listening.
For your energy.
Yeah.
I'm sure we had some inspirational nudges for the listeners.
I hope it's contagious.
Okay, that's a nice one, Jan. Thanks so much, Sid.
Yeah, thank you.